Good morning. I'm Reverend Susan Suchocki Brown, and I welcome you to this worship service at South Church. We are a Unitarian Universalist congregation and are aligned around Unitarian Universalist principles and purposes. And we are so delighted that you could join us this morning for this service. And the services, virtual world, don't happen without a lot of people in the background. And this morning I have a couple of those important people with me. I'd like to introduce you to Susan Adams, our pianist, Susan, and to Arthur Eves, our worship associate. We are delighted to have you here. And Arthur, would you tell us who are the rest of the players in making virtual services possible?
Kirsten Hunter, our Director of Lifespan Ministries, and Jen Daldeo, our RE Director, are giving us the time for all ages. Jen Leyden, our Office Administrator, is working behind the scenes, and Kathy Okhuysen is delivering the invocation. Pip Clews, as she has every week since this started, has been doing our video production. Thank you all very much.
The Social Justice Associates invite you to attend a webinar panel discussion. Dispelling Myths, Real Stories of Immigration and Detention will be held on June 10th from 7 to 8:30 p.m. You must register in advance for this webinar, and information about registration can be found on the homepage of the South Church website. After registering, you will receive a confirmation email containing information about how to join the webinar. We hope you're all able to join us. All current, incoming, and outgoing learning, pastoral, fellowship, social justice, and worship associates should join Social Hour after church today for associate training. The Social Hour link can be found in the chat box at the very end of the service. And now a message from Lauren Katz.
Good morning. My name is Lauren Katz, and I am a Learning Associate. The Learning Associates are working to enhance the learning and growth of individuals and encourage investigation on how this brings cohesion to the South Church community. So, we're exploring how do we do spiritual growth at South Church? And we invite you to join our focus group on June 22nd at 7 p.m. on Zoom to experience our proposed guided discussion and offer feedback. Please contact myself or Kirsten Hunter if you are able to attend. Zoom seats are limited to 20. Thank you.
Be lamps unto yourself, be your own confidence. Hold to the truth within yourself as to the only lamp. Be lamps unto yourself, be your own confidence. Hold to the truth within yourself as to the only lamp. Be lamps unto yourself, be your own confidence. Hold to the truth within yourself as to the only lamp.
How are you feeling today? If you're like me, you are boiling with frustration, rage, remorse, despondency, depression. Wanting to act, to do something, yet maybe feeling it's all futile, so what's the point? And on top of that, I feel the need to keep socially distanced. Isn't it good to get in touch with such a broad range of emotions? To be called to break out of social isolation into a world of excitement, a struggle for justice, a plea for our common humanity. And yet, on the other hand, to feel helpless and ineffective. But even while staying socially distanced, we can still feel the call and long to answer it as we are able. And we can find ways. I feel raw, ripped open by events, and yet excited too. This Monday, my family and I made our first foray into unsocial distance space to participate in the Dover Vigil for Black Lives Matter. It's estimated that between 1,000 and 3,000 people turned up. We couldn't get close enough to see or hear anything without diving into the crowd, but it was good to be there to stand in solidarity. I didn't do much, but I felt more powerful and supportive than I have for some time. Reading Facebook and liking or sharing articles is not the sort of activism that suits me. I'd like to be more of an activist and more spiritual. Spiritual activists are called to walk their talk. Staying at home makes that hard, but there are many things we can do. Our role is to connect the personal to the holy, whether individually or when acting as a group, to watch the energy and keep bringing it back to center, to assist others in finding whatever solace or meaning they can in their circumstances. It is sometimes enough to feel heard, to find an ally. Be that ally. On the streets if you're comfortable with it, but just listen wherever you are. Be an ally, bear witness, stand and serve in silent support. Your presence means more than you know. The Dover protest was organized by local high school students who expected maybe 50 people to show up. They held up a light for us, and so many people flocked to support them. I'm sure they're stunned and gratified. In our church community, we have many people holding up the light. Servant leadership that keeps everything going, keeps us connected with one another, with the world at large, and with our inner world. This week, we honor our learning, fellowship, worship, and social justice associates. Each one, individually and collectively, ignites the sparks that light up South Church and make it a place of learning, a warm and convivial spiritual home for us to seek our truest and best selves and to act for a better world. These people hold the light for us and actively help us all to live our mission statement. We thank you. Our chalice will be lit today by members of the South Church Social Justice Associate Program. I Can't Breathe has become a symbol for racial justice, police brutality, COVID-19, and more. Fortunately, we have the privilege of being able to breathe and to act. Let us choose wisely how we respond and act from our hearts. Now, please join with me as we recite our mission statement. At South Church, we nurture spiritual growth through worship, learning, and community. We celebrate the worth and dignity of all people, and we inspire one another to act on our faith in the larger community.
Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be with you this morning. Jen and I were talking this week about how much we love making up stories to tell you on Sunday mornings. We love being silly together and finding creative ways to offer lessons to you about how we might want to be in the world. We like to hide secret messages in the stories for you to find, like treasure.
Yes. But right now, there are some really big and difficult things happening. We tried and tried to make up a story for you, and it just wasn't working. Then we realized that before we can go back to telling stories, we just have to talk about these things first. And it feels really important to be clear and honest about them.
Yeah, there is a really big problem in our country that has been a really big problem for as long as we have had a country, and even before that. And basically, life in our country isn't fair, particularly for people who have Black or brown skin. It's been like this for so long, but right now, people are particularly angry because a Black man was murdered just about 2 weeks ago by a white police officer. And that has happened way, way too many times. And because it's happened over and over again, over so many years, every time it hurts more, and people struggle more with why we can't seem to solve this problem. It's wrong. It has to be fixed. And fixing it is harder than it seems.
One reason it's harder than it seems is because this unfairness isn't only about when people are killed. It's actually part of so many things about the way that we live our lives in our country, this unfairness for people with Black or brown skin. And so it's really complicated because it's a problem that shows up in so many different kinds of ways. But the good news is there are things that every single one of us can do to help. And probably the most important thing we can do is to talk about the problem and to stay curious and keep learning about the problem. Even if we think that we've learned all about the problem, we haven't. There's always more to learn. And kids are good at staying curious and asking questions and having conversations. And when Kirsten and I were kids, a lot of white families didn't have these kinds of conversations. They thought that they weren't part of the problem and didn't need to talk about it, or for whatever reason, it wasn't a regular thing to have conversations about. And so now it's really important to have those conversations because not having them makes the problem never get fixed.
Yep, it's true. I think if we'd talked about it more when we were kids, we wouldn't be in this place now. And so this is where we are. And so for kids especially, we wanted to share with you the best thing that you can do to help us solve this problem. And that thing is to ask questions, lots of questions. Really try to understand how come we have this problem and how we can fix it. How we can start treating everybody in our country fairly and kindly, just like we say we will do as members of South Church. We have lots of questions too. We've been having some really good talks in our children's classes this past week with a lot of you, and we welcome those talks. We can keep having them anytime you want, and we'll keep initiating them every so often as well. And there's grown-ups in your life that you can talk to about this. And grown-ups, you can come and talk to us too. We all need to figure this out together, and it just is going to require us to have a whole lot of conversations and keep thinking about how to create solutions.
You never have to worry about asking us anything. We love having all kinds of conversations. We really love it because we know that it's really helpful. And for some of our older kids and a lot of our grown-ups, we want to talk about how social media and the access that we have to information now can make us feel overwhelmed. It's hard to know what the balance is between staying informed and knowing when to put it away so that we can take care of our hearts, take care of our bodies, do our self-care so that we can function in our lives still and to actually be part of a solution.
There are some actions that you can take, and they might not feel big or dramatic, but the way that we start making change happen doesn't always happen in big and dramatic ways. A lot of this work is step-by-step work. So right now at church, there's all the supplies that you need if you want to come and make a flag that says an action that you're committing to take. Could be just learning more yourself, or committing to have conversations with your family members, or support Black businesses, or there are so many things that you can do to help us move forward, making this world better and more fair. We definitely want you to know, more than anything, how much we love you, how cared for you are, and especially for those of the members of our community who have Black and brown skin, who are struggling, especially in this moment, who are feeling anger and fear and frustration. We see you, and we're sending so much love to you. Do you think maybe we have time for a really quick story?
I think we could tell a news story now. And I think it should start with once upon a time. So once upon a time, there was a church that looked like a giant gray rock on the outside and a soft pink flower on the inside. There were rumors that all sorts of unusual things happened in this church.
They say that some of the people in this church would put on big, ridiculous hats with wild, dramatic plants growing out of the tops, and they would talk about gardens that could fit in your pocket.
In your pocket. And they say that inside this church, teenagers ran wildly about at night. And if you passed by on the sidewalk, you could see flashlight beams flapping, and you could hear cackles and screams coming from inside.
They say that a girl at this church liked to take her pet fish on a walk to the church.
They say that there was a bizarre tradition where on the last night of the year, they would fill the kitchen to the top of the ceiling with a certain spicy, goopy stew.
They also say that all the people at this church had hearts that didn't fit inside their chests. That these hearts were so big that they showed through their clothes and had a magnetic force that pulled the people toward things that were wrong in the world.
They say that this wonderful country we live in has some big problems, and that many huge hearts are needed. The odd people from the funny church are already on their way to the scenes of the problems, and they're following their hearts to know where to go.
I wonder, what will they do when they...
This month's collections will be shared between Black Lives UU and diverse UU multicultural ministries. BLUU Organizing Collective is committed to expanding the power and capacity of Black UUs within our faith, providing support, information, and resources for Black Unitarian Universalists, and justice making and liberation through our faith. DRUM is a Unitarian Universalist people of color ministry and anti-racist collective, bringing lay and religious professionals together to overcome racism through resistance and transform Unitarian Universalism through our multicultural experience. Both these organizations deserve our support. They're critical to reshaping our denomination to make it actually include all people. Please give as you are able.
Holy One of Blessing, we're gathered here this morning for a virtual worship service, surrounded by the many things that are our home. Some are watching on TV, some are watching out of doors, some are watching on their phones with family and friends. And we are ever so grateful for that opportunity to be together. It is important that we remain together, even virtually, during this time of chaos, this time of crisis, this time of huge transformation. We have been rocked by the events of these last few months. A pandemic that has left us reeling and frightened with losses of jobs, losses of life. People around us, close to us, have died, and we mourn them. And also, these last few days have seen us in the midst of protest and transformation and just chaos all around us as we come to terms with the reality of our country, a reality of a country that has the potential for so much good and has so many good people, but is built upon systems of oppression that are so hard to break apart. And Holy One, we don't know what to do with all those feelings. And so sometimes the only thing we can do is just be grateful for one another. Just be in silence. Just think about what it is that unites us, the love, the caring, the being together. For all that you hold in your heart of pain, I walk and am with you. For all that you hold in your heart of joy and celebration, I walk and hold within my own heart. You are not alone. You are loved. You are cared for. Love and peace is why we are united. Amen. Today I'm going to introduce 3 S's. They are service, self-knowledge, and silence. We celebrated one form of service this morning as we installed incoming and recognized leaving members of shared ministry and associate programs. We appreciate all that they have done and all that they will do. The shared ministry and associate programs are foundation of South Church. Each person in these teams helps us to meet the mission at South Church. Now, following the murder of George Floyd, we are being called to another kind of service. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a leader, a prophet, a preacher, a social transformer, a pastor, wrote, "A person has not begun to live until he can rise above the narrow confines of his own individual concerns to the broader concerns of all humanity." These words provide a foundation for the service we are being called to now. How do we rise above our self-centered concerns? How do we contribute to the betterment of humanity? These are questions that keep me up at night, and also questions that get me going in the morning, and why I am a Unitarian Universalist who is also an ordained minister. I believe a core message and mission of our Unitarian Universalism is to strengthen the interconnected web of existence, to struggle for and within the democratic process, and most of all, to side with others to be agents of transformation for a more just and equitable world. The murder of George Floyd is just one of thousands of deaths at the hands of the police. Already this year, there have been 3 police-related deaths of Black people. Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd. His death was another lynching and is part of a long line of continued systemic actions that dehumanize and kill our Black, Brown, Indigenous siblings. This mentality to destroy, to dehumanize those perceived as the other is not new, but that recent murder has ignited a tinderbox of emotions, raw, traumatized, profoundly frustrating. We watched in horror the death of George Floyd, and out came the rage. That dam broke, and demonstrations and vigils that became riots ensued. Enough, 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 enough. How and will it stop? That's my refrain. Former President Barack Obama, in response to the police issues and to the protest, wrote, "The point of a protest is to raise public awareness, to put a spotlight on injustices, and to make the powers to be uncomfortable." He goes on further to say that after the protests are over, we must learn how to shift systems to vote in all elections, national and local, to organize for change and to connect to bring about transformation. I want to urge you not to be sidetracked by the riots, the violence, or the looting. Yes, it is scary and it is upsetting, but don't let that be a distraction from the real work, the real service that can come out of protest. A commitment to real service can deepen our self-understanding and fill the spiritual needs that are so prevalent in our racially tense, racially charged, emotionally raw society. Now, I write the sermon before having the advantage of attending a Black Lives Matters protest scheduled for June 4th at Market Square. But I know that spiritual service, spiritual activism does involve protest. It is our nation's way, after all. It is part of our DNA. And this evening, I will be at the church helping to provide materials to make prayer flags. Thank you to Jen Daldeo and Kirsten Hunter for this amazingly creative way to bring healing to this time when we are called to contribute to the betterment of humanity. What does service as spiritual activism look like? Here are some suggestions from a blog titled Healing Collectively, a global blog. First and foremost, the author reminds us to support and build alliances with persons of color, organizations, individuals, and groups. We can be of service by being frontline protesters, but let's do it in solidarity by following the lead of people of color. Also, we can be of service by offering financial support as we are able. Within the UUA structure, both Black Lives of Unitarian Universalist, or BLUE, and DRUM, Diverse and Revolutionary Unitarian Universalist Ministries, are groups we can support. The spiritual service may also take the form of being healers and artists. And because we want to give you an opportunity to be a creative healer, we invite you to make a prayer flag to hang out in front of the church. Or you may find your way by writing a story, a poem, a sermon, an essay, or leading prayer circles, or creating music and song. Creative healing, creative arts fills our spiritual self and makes us able to be more fully able to live into that fullness of our being. Bridge building as service is something that we began to talk about last Sunday in social hour when a small group of us asked, who are the leaders of color in this area? And who do we need to make connections with so we can be lending a hand and contributing to the betterment of humanity? And if we are successful at bridge building, we will meet those that the author of the blog called amplifiers. These are the people who are the givers of correct and accurate information. These are the ones who provide us with inspiration. These are the ones we need to listen to. Barack Obama is one. And another voice I recently heard was Monica Cannon Grant. She is the CEO of Violence in Boston. And on Tuesday at a protest, she said, "Today is about us coming together, a space for us, by us, created by us, to be able to yell and scream and hold people accountable, come together, mourn, and just turn up." Another question I've been asking myself as I think about service, self-knowledge, and silence is, what personal changes do I need to be engaged in to be of service during this time of outrage and upset? I've decided that I can be of service, we can be of service if we provide places to do what Monica Cannon Grant said was needed. I know it's scary and rioting leaves us puzzled and anxious, but it is up to us. And I know that my spiritual self will grow if I'm willing to provide a place and a space where fear and frustrations can be expressed. I mean, I understand we are frustrated, we are frightened. And the loss of lives during this pandemic, particularly to persons of color and the economically suffering, has been too much. Enough, enough, enough. When will it stop? And in the midst of this, all it takes is a nudge or a misspoken word, or before we know it, chaos has ensued. It's uncomfortable, but it is all part of the process, which hopefully leads to healing. And that is why I bring up the second S of living a spiritually rich life: self-knowledge. Who am I? What am I made of? What are my growing edges? What values do I have? What are my strengths, my qualities? Self-knowledge as a spiritual way, maybe even a spiritual practice, can help us when we, or the world we live in, is in chaos. I ask myself and I ask you, what role do I play? What role can we play right now? The outrage I may be feeling, or what we feel as white folks, is not about us. I need to remember that it is generation upon generation of oppression, which we are once again called to take notice of, if not some responsibility for, not individually, but collectively. And I encourage you, if you've not yet done so, to read Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, and Ibram Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist. And there are many, many other books to recommend. However, I will add a caution. Read these books in pieces and find a dialogue partner as you go along. Gaining knowledge of self around issues of our white fragility is tough work. Being with others, working together, dreaming together, challenging together, creating together is easier when we are connected to others. And I know for me, it is often then that I can be coaxed or cajoled or called to do and become better. And we are being called to rise above our individual concerns today, right now, to be of service and to address the concerns of all humanity. And that third S is silence. Not the complicit, uninvolved silence of privilege or of fear, but the need to silence our individual voices and mine and hear the formerly voiceless speak. Silence, to sit with the pain and the frustration and not run out with the do good for others action, our desire to rescue rather than partner with. And silence to confront our personal challenges, personal growing edges, and yes, our own personal fears and yearnings. As we develop relationships of accountability, these can be shared. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that accountability? Well, I mean a silence that allows us to grow our self-understanding, a silence that allows us to be vulnerable and open, and a silence that allows us to become interconnected with others in meaningful ways, where we can hear where we have been part of the problem instead of part of the solution. And I would remind you that we have the privilege of being in silence with nature, which reminds us of the cycles of life and the ongoing rhythmic nature of being, of which we are just one small little part. Service, silence, and self-knowledge. My 3 S's, my 3 stepping stones to being both a better person and to being a better partner during this time. And 3 traits that I want to develop and become more aware of each day and practice as a spiritual practice so that I can live my life as a spiritual being who will embody our Unitarian Universalist values. The world desperately needs us to show up and stand by and be with others. May it be so.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our benediction today is from Reverend David Miller of the UU Congregation of Fairfax, Virginia. I pray we hear, see, and allow ourselves to feel the deep-seated anger we are now experiencing. I pray we act to support change in ways we have never done before. I pray that we not allow the forces of supremacy that infect the minds of our current leadership be allowed to break our republic. I pray for peace, but not at the expense of equality and justice. The people united can never be divided. Let us weave our web of connection, over-communicate, and for those of us who haven't had to, let us make the sacrifices we are called to in these incredibly difficult days. We are in this. We have to be. There is no other choice. We are in this together.